You know the drill. Another ticket lands. Shared mailbox for the new project. Room mailbox for the renovated floor. A list for sales that someone will have to update by hand next week. And a contractor who needs a directory entry in mail flow, except nobody remembers whether it is a contact or a mail user. So you click. And click. And click. Every checkbox, every dropdown, every next button, one recipient at a time. Now imagine the entire zoo, every single type, stood up in one script. By the time you leave this lab, you will never provision a mailbox by hand again. You're provisioning every recipient type a real organization needs. To take that further, Build Microsoft 365 Administration Agents shows you how to create AI agents that automate tasks like these. It covers Microsoft Graph, Python, Azure AI, and more, with hands-on labs and a capstone project to build a complete multi-agent administration platform. We begin by setting up an identity that can sign in without a human, making everything we build schedulable. First, we perform reconnaissance on what already exists with Connect Exchange Online and Get Mailbox. Then we stand up the shared, room, and equipment mailboxes using New Mailbox. Next, we give sales their distribution lists, both static and self-maintaining, through New Distribution Group and New Dynamic Distribution Group. We handle contractor directory presence with New Mail Contact and New Mail User. Finally, we cover leave scenarios by granting full access and send as permissions with Add Mailbox Permission and Add Recipient Permission. You walk away with a complete set of scripts you can run on any Microsoft 365 tenant. Before any of this can be automated, the tenant needs an identity that a script can sign in as. We build that in code, because a course about automation should not start by asking you to click through a portal. By the end of this section, you will have an app registration, a service principal, and a connection that needs no human at all. We install the Exchange Online Management module into the current user scope. This avoids needing admin rights on the local machine and keeps the module isolated. The force switch ensures a clean install even if an older version exists. We connect to Microsoft Graph interactively with just one permission, application read-write all. This lets us create the app registration and service principal. We do this once, as ourselves, because creating an app requires a real user with the right directory role. We look up Microsoft Graph's service principal and find the Exchange Manage as app role by name. This is the only permission the Exchange Online cmlets need for app-only access. We never guess a GUID, we always ask the service principal for the real one. We build the permission request using the real role IDs we just looked up, then create the app registration named M365 Automation. This app will have exactly one permission, Exchange Manage as app, which is the least privilege needed for unattended mailbox management. We create the service principal, which is the identity the app uses inside the tenant. Then we add a client secret that expires in 6 months. In production, you would use a certificate instead. Secrets are less secure and silently expire, breaking every script that depends on them. We open the admin consent URL in a browser. A global administrator must approve the permission for the whole tenant. This is a one-time step. Once consented, we connect unattended using the client ID and secret. This is the connection method every subsequent lab script will use. The script installs the module silently. Connect MG Graph prints a welcome message. New MG application returns a table with the app's display name, client ID, and object ID. Add MG application password outputs the secret text. This is the only time you will see it. The final Connect MG Graph confirms unattended authentication succeeded. Before you create 5 new recipient objects, you need to know how this tenant already names things. Inconsistent naming makes help desk work miserable later, so we start with recon. Pulling recipient type details on a known good mailbox gives you a baseline for what the new objects should look like, and it confirms your admin account actually has the rights this whole project depends on before you're 3 steps deep and stuck. Watch for the user mailbox type and the first name last name pattern. That's your template for everything coming next. We'll connect to Exchange Online with the admin account, then run Get Mailbox against Jane Doe. the output will show her mailbox type, primary address, and all proxy addresses, confirming the naming convention and our permissions. First, connect Exchange Online with the user principal name parameter set to admin.contoso.com. This is a completely separate authentication from Microsoft Graph. You'll get a browser MFA prompt. Then get mailbox with the identity parameter set to jane.doe.contoso.com, piped into format list to show name, recipient type details, primary SMTP address, and email addresses. Recipient type details comes back as user mailbox, so we know the admin account has the rights to read and create mailboxes. The primary address is firstname.lastname@contoso.com, and the proxy addresses show an alias and the on Microsoft fallback. That's the naming convention we'll follow for every new object in this project. When HR, facilities, and sales all need collaboration spaces, you don't buy 3 different products, you use one mailbox type with 3 flavors. Shared, room, and equipment mailboxes all sit on the same underlying object. Each gets a disabled intra ID account that doesn't consume a license as long as the mailbox stays under 50 gigabytes. That makes them perfect for a team inbox, a bookable conference room, and a projector cart that people need to reserve. But here's the catch: creating the mailbox does not give anyone permission to open it. Access is a completely separate grant you'll handle later. In this step, you'll create all 3 and watch for the recipient type details that prove each one landed in the right category. I'll run 3 new mailbox commands, one with the shared switch, one with room, and one with equipment. Each will return a mailbox object, and will confirm the correct type details in the output. First, new mailbox shared creates the HR team inbox with the addressor team contoso.com. The shared switch tells Exchange to stamp it as a shared mailbox. Next, new mailbox room builds the Redwood conference room. The display name includes the capacity in parentheses, which is a common convention so users see it in the address book. Finally, new mailbox equipment creates the projector cart as a bookable resource. All 3 use primary SMTP address to set the exact email address the requesters asked for. 3 mailboxes created, and the recipient type details column confirms exactly what we expected: shared mailbox, room mailbox, and equipment mailbox. Notice there's no mention of permissions anywhere in this output. That's the pitfall. If someone from HR tries to open her team contoso.com right now, they'll get a cannot open mailbox error. Access has to be granted separately with add mailbox permission, which you'll do in a later step. Sales asked for a plain distribution list, so we'll create a static group with named members. But knowing this team has constant turnover, we're also going to build a dynamic group that automatically pulls in anyone whose department attribute is set to sales. The trade-off is that dynamic membership isn't a fixed list you can glance at, it's computed on the fly whenever mail is sent or the group is queried. Watch for how the static group shows its members immediately, while the dynamic group has no member list at all, just a recipient filter that runs at send time. We'll run 2 commands, one to create a static distribution group with Alice and Bob as members, and one to create a dynamic distribution group that auto-includes any sales department mailbox. The static group will return member details, the dynamic group will show no members, just a filter. First, new distribution group creates a standard list named Sales Team with a primary SMTP address and the members parameter set to Alice and Bob. Then, new dynamic distribution group creates all sales, dynamic, with a recipient filter that checks for a department of sales and a recipient type of user mailbox, meaning only licensed user mailboxes in sales get included, not contacts or shared mailboxes. The static group came back with a name, display name, and its SMTP address, standard group properties. The dynamic group shows no members, just the recipient filter we defined. That's the key difference: dynamic membership is a query, not a list. Remember, if you change someone's department to sales, they won't appear instantly. Directory replication takes a few minutes, so don't assume the filter failed if the count doesn't jump right away. When an external person needs to show up in your address book, you have 2 choices, and picking the wrong one breaks downstream workflows. A mail contact is the lightest touch, it's just a forwarding entry in the global address list with no sign-in capability at all. That's perfect for a vendor rep who only needs to be reachable. But a contractor who needs to be added to security groups, appear in the org chart, or potentially get a Teams license later requires a real directory object. That's a mail user. It still routes mail to their external address, but it creates an actual identity and Entra ID with a user principal name. The pitfall is that teams and the admin centers often default to creating a mail contact, and you won't notice the mistake until someone tries to add the contractor to a security group and their name simply isn't offered. In this step, you'll create both types and see the difference in the output right away. You'll run two commands, one to create a mail contact for the vendor rep, and one to create a mail user for the contractor. Watch the recipient type details in the output, it will confirm exactly which object type you built. First, new mail contact creates the vendor rep. We give it a display name and an external email address pointing to their real mailbox at Acme Supplies. That's all it needs, no password, no UPN. Second, new mail user builds the contractor's identity. We set their name, and the Microsoft Online Services ID parameter becomes their UPN and Entra ID, driveracontoso.com. The external email address still routes mail out to their consulting firm address. And because this is a real user object, it requires a password, so we use read host to prompt for a secure string. Look at the recipient type details column. The vendor rep shows mail contact, that's the lightweight GAL entry with no sign-in. The contractor shows mail user, a full directory identity that can be licensed and added to groups. If you had accidentally created a mail contact for the contractor, that mail user line would read mail contact instead, and later when someone tries to add them to a security group, they'd be silently missing from the picker. This output proves you built the right object for each scenario. When a colleague goes on leave, the first instinct is to grant full access to their mailbox. That lets the delegate open every folder and manage every item, but it has a hidden catch. Any message they send from Outlook will still show on behalf of the absent person, which looks unprofessional to clients and partners. The reason is that full access is a mailbox permission, while send is a completely separate recipient permission on the mail-enabled object itself. You have to add both, independently, or you will get the help desk call every admin dreads, I can see her inbox but I can't send as her. In this final lab, you will grant both permissions and then verify them with the two different cmlets that govern them. I will run add mailbox permission for full access and add recipient permission for sendus, both targeting Sarah Chen's mailbox for Mark Taylor. Then we will check the output to confirm each permission is listed separately. First, add mailbox permission gives Mark full access to Sarah's mailbox. The identity is her email, the user is Mark, and access rights is full access with inheritance type set to all so it applies to every folder. Next, add recipient permission grants the sendus right. Notice the parameter name changes to trustee for the delegate, and we add confirm false to skip the prompt. These are two different cmlets because they touch two different permission models. The first table confirms Mark has full access on Sarah's mailbox. The second table, from a completely different cmlet, confirms he also has sendus. This is exactly what the theory predicted, two separate permissions, two separate results. Remember, even though both are granted now, it can take up to an hour before they replicate, and Mark will need to restart Outlook before Sarah's mailbox appears and the send as option becomes available in the from field. We have moved from reconnaissance with get mailbox all the way through to delegating full access and send as permissions with add mailbox permission and add recipient permission. You now have a repeatable, scriptable pattern for every recipient type in the mailbox zoo. The single most useful thing to carry away is that automation is not about memorizing every parameter, it is about knowing which cmlet owns the task so you never have to click through the portal for that job again.